The email came on a Wednesday. The subject line was harmless enough. Quick update, free Christmas dinner, but I knew before I opened it. It was from my sister-in-law, Jessa. 5 lines, no greeting, no warmth. Hey, Celeste, this year's Christmas dinner is going to be a little tight space-wise. Hope you understand. Let's find another time to catch up after the holidays. Wishing you a peaceful season. I read it twice, not because it surprised me, but because it didn't. There was no phone call, no explanation. Just another polite erasure wrapped in seasonal language and signed off with indifference. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it to anyone or mention it in our family group thread, though I noticed later that my name had quietly vanished from the "What's everyone bringing" list. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. Outside my apartment window, the city moved as if nothing had happened. Cars hummed past below, and someone across the street had already put up blinking lights. The coffee on my desk had gone cold. On the shelf behind me sat a small red box, one I hadn't touched in years. I reached for it without thinking, lifted the lid. Inside was a folded card, Christmas 27, one of the only handwritten notes I'd ever received from my father. Keep your head down, Celeste. Quiet. Girls last longer. He meant it as encouragement, I think. I was 16 then, and they still talked to me. I still had a place at the table. That was before I learned that silence makes people forget you. They forgot who paid the deposit on Mason's first office. They forgot who picked up Grandma when no one else would drive. They forgot I existed unless they needed something easy, invisible, or quiet. But this time, this year, they made a mistake. Because while they were deciding who was important enough to invite, they didn't know I had just finalized the acquisition of the logistics company they'd been courting for the last 11 months, the one they were planning to pitch on December 21st, the one whose future depended on a single name. Mine, and I was done being quiet. I've always known how my family sees me, not with malice exactly, just distance. Like I was a reliable background detail, someone you count on to refill the coffee or take the photo, someone you'd ever feature in the frame. My older brother Mason, on the other hand, was the centerpiece. He was always full of energy, the kind of person who took up space without asking for it. Loud, laugh, firm handshake, firm opinions. My parents used to call him a natural leader. I once heard my mother say he could sell rain to Seattle. They never said things like that about me. With me, it was always Celeste. Doesn't mind. Celeste will understand. She's always been more private. Learned young that being quiet made things easier for everyone. When Mason wanted to borrow my car, I handed over the keys. When my dad needed someone to organize the family's tax folders, I did it without being asked. I never made a fuss about it. That's how I got through dinners where no one asked about my job or holidays where I arrived on time and left with the dishes. They didn't ignore me out of cruelty. They ignored me because I didn't ask them not to. At my niece's birthday last year, I gave her a telescope and a book about constellations. Mason gave her a glittery scooter. Everyone clapped for the scooter. The telescope stayed in its box. My mom thanked me, but she couldn't remember what I'd brought 10 minutes later. It's not that I wanted applause. I just wanted to be seen. When I got promoted 2 years ago, my name printed on a real office door, I told my family over dinner at my parents' place. Mason didn't even pause between bites. "That's great, Celeste," he said, reaching for the butter. "By the way, Dad did I tell you about the guy I met at the conference last week? That's how it always went." When I funded the deposit for Mason's second warehouse after his investor backed out, he forgot to mention it in his thank you speech. When I paid the final balance on Mom's knee surgery after the insurance gap, she told people her coverage finally kicked in. I didn't correct them. I told myself I didn't need credit, that what mattered was helping, being useful, staying dependable. But somewhere along the way, being dependable became being disposable. They didn't forget my name, they just stopped using it. Even when I was there, I wasn't really there. And now that I had something they wanted, they didn't even pretend Jess's email wasn't about space. It was a reminder you're not part of this. Not in the way that matters, but that was fine because I wasn't planning to stay in the background much longer. I never set out to build anything big. It started with a quiet exit, leaving a company I'd helped grow for 7 years after they passed me over for a promotion. I trained the recipient to handle. I didn't shout or threaten to quit. I just packed up my office one Friday afternoon and told no one. The next Monday, I sat at my kitchen table, With a second-hand laptop, a fresh legal pad, and a cheap cup of coffee, I gave myself a deadline. 90 days to find a problem worth solving. By day, I freelanced supply chain modeling. Mostly, I worked odd hours, took on clients no one wanted. By night, I researched the gaps between mid-sized distributors and emerging regional carriers. What I found wasn't flashy, but it was consistent. Eventually, I formed a company, Small Quiet Lean. I didn't name it after myself. I registered it in Delaware under a generic holding name. North Arrow Systems, no LinkedIn post, no family announcement. At first, it was just me and a 24-year-old operations genius named Malik, who I met through a Slack channel. Then came Julia, who handled contracts like a surgeon. Then Lena and I had been friends in college. We used to sit on the fire escape outside our dorm and talk about the kind of women we'd become. She was bold, irreverent, magnetic. I was the one who double-checked the train schedule, Lena had once said. If you ever need me to walk into a room and make everyone underestimate me, I'm your girl. I remembered that line when we were preparing our first major pitch. I wasn't trying to hide who I was, but I also knew after years of watching how people dismissed me that sometimes silence is the strongest leverage. Let them think the girl who never interrupted anyone wasn't capable of owning the room. Let them forget I was there until it was too late. That's how we built it. In just over a year, we'd acquired 3 smaller logistics firms, quietly, no fanfare. Our network ran leaner, faster, smarter. We turned down VC funding twice. I wanted control, not congratulations. So when Lena came to me with a file marked Prospective Strategic Partnership Eastbound Freight into Solutions, I almost laughed because Eastbound was my brother Mason's company, and the firm they wanted to partner with the company they believed would solve their distribution. Bottleneck was us. They had no idea I flipped through their pitch deck. It was all there, glowing projections, warehouse expansion timelines, expected reach into secondary markets. They'd clearly been working on this deal for months, and they didn't know the final decision rested with me. They thought I was still freelancing, still working from home. Still Celeste, the sister who never had much going on. That was the part that stung, how easy it had been for them to believe I'd stayed small, that I wouldn't build anything worth noticing. But I had. And now, every update, every email, every pre-contract draft flowed through Lena to my desk. There was one line Mason had written in the executive summary of his proposal that stayed with me. This partnership will allow both companies to scale quickly, provided the decision-makers remain aligned. It made me smile because I was the decision-maker, and I was about to give them the meeting they'd been begging for. They just wouldn't recognize it when it started. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning, 9 Huzri a.m. sharp. Lena texted me at 8:46. They're early. Nervous. The cousins pacing. I watched the feed from my office technically a converted second bedroom in my apartment. The camera was tucked discreetly into the corner of the boardroom, wide-angle clear audio. Just enough to see their faces, not enough for them to know they were being seen. Mason arrived in a navy blazer, the one he wears when he wants to feel in control. Jonah, our cousin, followed behind him, carrying a branded portfolio like he was auditioning for a role. A third man, someone from their marketing team, said something about projections and locking this in before the holidays. Lena welcomed them with a calm smile. She wore gray, always gray, soft-spoken, but never unsure. She let them settle, let them talk. Mason, true to form, launched into the pitch before anyone asked. We believe this partnership is the missing piece. Your network, our routes. With the right execution, we're looking at doubling Q2 revenue by March. Lena nodded, jotting notes. Then she asked gently, "And what makes you confident we're aligned? We've done our research," Mason said. "We've modeled logistics based on your existing hubs. Assuming you're authorized to sign by Echelon Holdings, of course." There was a beat of silence. Lena leaned back in her chair. "I represent Echelon, but I don't sign." Mason blinked. "You're not the founder." "No," she said, and this time her voice carried more weight. "She is. She built the network. She funds it. She signs every deal." The air in the room shifted. Jonah leaned forward. "Wait, we've been speaking with the wrong person." Lena reached into her folio and slid a document across the table. I'd seen it earlier that week, my name in black ink, crisp and unmistakable. Celeste Ward, founder and CEO. Mason stared at the page, his eyes scanning it too quickly, as if speed would undo the meaning. "Is this a joke?" he asked quietly. "No," Lena said. "She got your Christmas message, by the way, the one about space being tight. Thought you'd want to know." No one spoke. Jonah rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly very still. Mason looked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the right tone. Lena smiled, professional as ever. "You're still welcome to present your offer, but just so you know, she's not looking for partners anymore. She's looking to acquire." It was the gentlest knife I'd ever seen turned. I sat back from the monitor, letting the silence linger. They weren't angry yet. That would come later. Right now, they were just realizing all this time they thought I was sitting alone at Christmas because I had nowhere better to be. What they didn't know was that I'd been building the table they were now begging to sit at. I sent the email that same afternoon. No subject line, no greeting. Just one sentence. December 25th, 9 a.m., my address. Bring nothing. I knew they wouldn't respond. I also knew they would show up. When people realize they've been left out of something they thought they controlled, they don't demand an apology. They look for a way back in. So I waited. Christmas morning arrived cold and gray. The street was quiet, the city slowed to a crawl. I brewed coffee, lit a single candle on the windowsill, and set the table. 4 plates, 4 cups, linen napkins folded sharp at the corners. There was no centerpiece. Just warm bread eggs and a silver carafe that hadn't been used in years. At exactly 9 a.m., a knock opened the door to find Mason, Jonah, and our father. No wives, no kids, no coats, unzipped. Just the 3 of them standing on the porch like students waiting outside the principal's office. I didn't say a word, just stepped aside. They entered slowly, their footsteps too loud on the hardwood. Mason looked around. "You've kept it nice." I didn't answer. They sat hesitantly, each man glancing at the other as if waiting for permission. I poured coffee for everyone, including myself. Then I sat across from them and folded my hands. The silence stretched. Finally, Jonah cleared his throat. "So, are we here about the deal?" I looked at him, then at Mason, then at my father. "You're here because you remembered I exist," I said calmly. "And because you realized I'm not as invisible as you believed." Mason leaned forward. "Celeste, we didn't mean to..." What I interrupted. Didn't mean to leave my name off the invitation list. Didn't mean to send a 5-line email instead of a phone call. Or didn't mean to underestimate me for the 15th year in a row. No one answered. I reached for a folder resting on the edge of the table and slid it forward. Inside was the finalized contract. Everything they'd hoped for. The deal. The opportunity. The thing they'd built their projections around. Mason looked at it, then at me. Are you giving us the contract?" I nodded slowly. "Yes." "But there's a condition." He tensed. "What kind of condition?" "From this point forward, I said you work under my structure, not beside it. You report to me. You follow the systems I've built. And if I ever hear you speak to someone the way you spoke to me last month or last year or every year before that..." I let the pause stretch until Jonah shifted in his seat. "I won't cancel your deal," I finished. "I'll cut your company." The silence that followed was colder than the air outside. They knew I meant it. Not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't need to. Mason sat back, his jaw tight. Then finally he said something I hadn't expected. "You really waited for this moment." I looked at him. Really looked. "No," I said quietly. I waited for the silence to mean something, and then I stood. I picked up the empty plates. I refilled the carafe. I moved through the room like I had for years, but now they saw it. They saw me, not the helper, not the girl in the background, not the sibling who didn't mind, just me. And for the first time in a very long time, they had no idea what to do with that. I never stepped foot in their office, not once I didn't need to. The new logo, North Arrow Holdings, was mounted on the front of the building by the end of January. The font was sharp, understated. My name wasn't anywhere on it, but everyone inside knew who it pointed back to. The weekly reports started arriving like clockwork, polished decks, revised projections, revised tone. Mason's signature appeared smaller on each file, like he was shrinking into the margins. He was no longer CEO. That title went to someone else. A woman named Clarice, their former regional manager years ago. Mason once called her too soft to lead. Turns out she wasn't. Now she sat in the corner office, the one he used to fill with trophies and meaningless framed quotes. The plaques came down. The ego left with them. My cousin Jonah tried calling me twice. I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded his number to our internal HR platform with a note. All communication goes through channels now. Keep it professional. He didn't try again. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. Anger burns fast. What I felt was quieter than that, heavier, like ash after the fire's gone out. 3 weeks later, I walked past a coffee shop on my way to a meeting. Through the fogged glass, I saw them, Mason, Jonah, and my father. No smiles, no bluster. Just 3 men staring into half-empty mugs, saying nothing. I didn't go in. Some reckonings are loud. Mine Wasn't Mine came in quarterly reports, system audits and controlled ownership transitions, clean, quiet, permanent. 30 days after the acquisition, the final paperwork was signed. Eastbound Freight and Solutions ceased to exist. The brand dissolved. Their email addresses were updated to @NorthArrowCom. Their legacy, once printed on business cards and splashed across banners at trade expos, now sat as a footnote in an internal document labeled Subsidiary Ward Group, Logistics Division. No announcement, no farewell post, just deletion. A week after that, I called an all-hands meeting. I didn't tell them I'd be attending. They packed into the conference room like it was any other quarterly update. Mason sat in the front row spine, straight. Clarice stood near the door. Lena, always 5 steps ahead, had arranged everything. The lights dimmed, a short video played, not of me, but of the company's history. The mistakes, the wasted potential, missed opportunities, masked as confidence. Then 1 sentence appeared on the screen. Sometimes the person you ignore is building the ground you're about to stand on. A ripple moved through the room. A few gasps. Someone whispered my name. And then I walked in. I didn't say much. I looked at the faces. Some guilty, some hollow, some just confused, and I said, "You gave up on me when I had nothing. Now I own everything you built, and everything you thought I couldn't." The final slide came up. Effective immediately. All former partners are now employees. Titles removed. Salaries adjusted. Welcome to the new order. No applause. Just silence. As I turned to leave, someone near the back asked almost gently, "Why didn't you just shut it down?" I paused at the doorway. Because shutting it down would have ended it. Owning it means they live with it. I stepped into the hallway, and just like that, I left not only the room, but the story they once told about me for good. Some people come back to be welcomed. I came back so they could never rewrite the truth. If this story sat with you, if it reminded you of the rooms you were kept out of, or the names you were told not to say, then maybe you know what it feels like to be quietly erased, and maybe now, like me, you're done staying quiet. Subscribe if you've ever rebuilt yourself in silence. Share this if you know someone who thinks being quiet means being small, and if you've ever been cut out just for being the one who saw things clearly, you're not alone. I never asked to be loved again. I only made sure they'd never forget I was there.